Once again, God is great. And let's call Isaiah chapter 18 tribute, a word that is literally going to come from the end of the chapter, which roughly begins the same way as it ends, with a prophecy, as we said, against Cush. Did we say that already? It's a prophecy against Cush if we haven't already said that. But the description of them in verse 2 is something that I think is unique to most of the other nations that he is going to prophesy against in the string of verses that we said, or really chapters. It goes from that point at which he is beginning with the judgment on his people, Judah, then turning to the judgment of the nations, and ultimately in chapter 24, the entire world. But here he describes Cush in chapter 18, verse 2, as a nation tall and smooth, to a people feared near and far, a nation mighty and conquering, whose land the rivers divide. After that description of Cush, he is then going to turn his attention to the world, to call them to attention, to see what he's going to do to Cush. As in verse 4, he's going to say, "For thus the Lord said to me, I will quietly look from my dwelling." As in verse 5, he's going to say, "For before the harvest," giving them another timeline for when the judgment is going to happen. He's going to say that in verse 6, "They shall all of them be left to the birds of prey of the mountains." But as we have seen with his judgment on Judah, or Israel, Judah, Syria, and all the nations we've seen him pronounce judgment on to this point, those who are fortunate get a remnant. And that is what he is going to seem to leave to Cush, where verse 7 will say, "At that time, tribute," that's our title, "will be brought to the Lord of hosts," from a description that ends much the same way as we said. It begins from a people tall and smooth, from a people feared near and far, a nation mighty and conquering, whose land the rivers divide. Where they're going to bring it to, in case there's any mistake, they're going to bring their tribute to Mount Zion, the place of the name of the Lord of hosts. Reminding me of at least two things. First, as we have already mentioned, we are blessed if God brings us or leaves us a remnant in our day of judgment, because there are some judgments where he leaves us nothing, as we have seen specifically in the judgment against Babylon. Thus, the imagery in verse 5 of the way he will cut off the shoots with pruning hooks may give us another indication of how God shows mercy even in judgment, understanding the way in which Jesus even talked about the way in which God prunes those whom he loves, and he disciplines the sons that he loves. And so Cush seems fortunate even in their day of judgment to have something left with which they can bring God tribute, quite possibly reiterating a point that he made once again all the way back in Isaiah chapter 2, where he said in verse 20, "In that day man will cast away their idols," as he goes on in verse 22 to connect what seemed to be an irrelevant point where he says, "Stop regarding man, in whose nostrils is breath, for of what account is he?" That literally seems to be the same point he is making here in Isaiah 18, on the heels of having made the point in Isaiah 17 that we need to stop regarding idols. Here in Isaiah 18, as we saw in Isaiah chapter 2, the idol that he seems to be warning us about making quite simply seems to be man, as he seems to be using Cush to remind the entire world that it's only a matter of time before even the most intimidating of men are offering him tribute.